There is a popular African saying that when two elephants are fighting, the grass suffers. For centuries, women and girls, we have always been the grass. Our bodies have always been used as a weapon, as things, as tools for patriarchy and men and those in power to negotiate, to do with it as they please, as if we are just nothing, as if we are the statistics that we see in the news. But we are women. When two elephants fight, the grass suffers. I have never known war, maybe through Aya when she always talked about the Arab Spring. She never likes when it is called that way. Or when Rose Washuka would talk about the violence that would ensue whenever there was an election in Nairobi, in Kenya. But I had my first encounter in 2015 when I used to work in 7 refugee camps in Cameroon, reporting the experiences of refugees that were fleeing Boko Haram from Nigeria or the war in Central African Republic. When Aya told me that I was going to be moderating this session, my very first picture that came to my mind was a day at the refugee camp. I was focused on my phone. And because I worked with Plan International at the time, Plan was very well known at the camp. So whenever they see us with the jacket, it's a friendly face. The children will gather around and play. And there was this particular situation that day. A little girl ran past me, greeted me. I lifted my head and greeted her. I noticed she was going towards the bathrooms, the temporary bathrooms in the refugee camps in Lolo, one of the camps. And I bent my head doing what I can't remember, and suddenly I heard screaming. So everyone, there was a lot of chaos and rustle, we went. What I saw was an almost lifeless little girl that just passed by. She had been gang raped by a couple of refugees in the camp. That was my first experience of what it means to experience sexual violence in a time of conflict. Fast forward to the 21st of April, 2020. Cameroon was in full-blown war. I come from one of the 2 marginalized regions. I was pregnant, heavily pregnant. I'd been in pain. It was a complicated pregnancy, yes. But on that particular day, I promised my baby, I said, we will go to the hospital. But I couldn't step out of the house because the war that was happening outside of my house was far more threatening than the violence and the war that was happening within my uterus. 5 hours of negotiating with my friend on how to get to the hospital, which, by the way, is not far. I lost that baby, and I will always sit and wonder, who do I hold accountable? Is it me for not taking the risk to go out and save my baby? Or is it the 2 elephants that are fighting, and I became the grass, and my baby became the grass? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the next discussion is going to be about. Bringing to the center the voices, the experiences, the perspectives, the narrative of survivors of sexual, gender-based violence. Creating an opportunity where these voices get to meet with you all, policymakers. We are going to be inviting on stage today survivors coming from the grassroots, those who are working to bring change within the civil society sector, as well as those who are doing it from the government arm. So I'm going to be welcoming to the panel today Nimko Ali Obe, CEO of the 5 Foundation. Nimko is an FGM survivor, strategist, and author. Born in Somaliland, you're welcome. She is CEO and co-founder of the Five Foundation. I'm also going to welcome Sibeso Mululuma, UNFPA officer in charge. Sibeso currently works as the officer in charge for UNFPA in Sierra Leone. You're welcome, ma'am. I will also call on stage the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of Sierra Leone, Alpha Cisse. You're welcome, Your Honor. Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to have a conversation, and in this conversation we would like to define what survivor-centered governance looks like. We also want to look at what successful models have been practiced around the continent, examine how anti-right movements are threatening bodily autonomy. We want to explore how civil society and the government can work together as a team to advance survival power. But most importantly, we also want to identify practical pathways for elevating survivors from consultation to decision-making spaces. So I'm also going to acknowledge that we have two videos from those who were supposed to be part of our panel but couldn't make it. We are going to acknowledge Hind Abu Hazi from Morocco, and Dr. Jibril Diallo, President of African Renaissance and Diaspora Network. They are not here with us today, but if time permits, we are going to have a video from both. So I will head straight to the question. My first question is going to go to Nimco. As a survivor of FGM and a global leader on ending gender-based violence, I do find myself, like I said, asking, who do I hold accountable? So as a survivor, who do you hold accountable?
Thank you very much for having me. I think in terms of that conversation, I hold whoever's in power at that moment. It is ultimately holding power accountable. And I think I always say that in terms of the survivor conversation, what I found in leadership is whether I'm sitting at tables at the G7 or whether it's in Africa or wherever it is, that many women around those tables are survivors but just haven't been given the strength in order to be able to experience or to be able to explain that. So I do ultimately think it's about holding leaders accountable. And in the concept of FGM, it's been really interesting. So I have for almost like 3 decades been talked about and never talked to. So in the conversation where I came into my activism, ultimately I was sitting in a room where girls like me were talked about in a very policy way. Yeah. And in that moment, I realized that my silence was massively complicit to the misunderstanding of what FGM was. There were words being thrown about, such as ignorance, such as harmful traditional practices, as opposed to what FGM really was, which was a systematic, organized crime against gender and against women, and against the fundamental building bricks of what a girl should be. So the reality of what FGM is and what many forms of violence against children is in order to ensure that we don't go into ourselves. Mm-hmm. And even though at the grassroots level, the cutting of FGM is being done by women or by community leaders, those things are being upheld by actual real power. So it's those that don't want to see women empowered, those don't want to see women with control of their bodies that are ultimately facilitating FGM to happen. So I guess whoever is holding the position of power is who I hold accountable.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Sibeso. As someone that works with the UNFPA, how is UNFPA, the institution that you work with, ensuring that survivors shape not just benefit from the programs that you design, particularly in fragile or post-conflict contexts where justice systems may be weak or under-resourced?
Thank you very much.
Maybe we pass the mic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start by first acknowledging how honored I am to be sharing this space with so many powerful speakers that spoke before us, Madam Mayor and others that spoke before us. This is my 3.5 years in Sierra Leone, and I should say I have seen change happening. within my first year, I was very disillusioned. Initially, I was coming here believing that coming to help the government tackle maternal mortality. Of course, our transformative results as UNFPA includes preventing maternal mortality, addressing gender-based violence and harmful practices, and ensuring that women are empowered by being able to control their reproduction so that they are part of the productive macroeconomy. I quickly realized that there were huge social norms issues that really were a barrier to women actually being part of the development trajectory of the country. Gender-based violence in all its forms, whether it's child marriage, whether it's teenage pregnancy, whether it's FGM, are some of the critical issues that hold this country behind, but they are not spoken because they are happening invisibly, and they are being held as culture. So for UNFPA, we consider ourselves the activist wing of the UN because we tackle very difficult subjects, because we believe that those are the subjects that are keeping girls and women from being at the table. They are sitting on the rights of women and their ability to fulfill their potential. So we do believe that we should never create any programs without our beneficiaries at the table. So when it comes to speaking about gender-based violence or FGM or any other harmful practice survivors, as UNFPA, we ensure that the entry point is the voice of those people. So data generation is very critical. We need to understand what are the root causes of these issues so that we're not tackling superficial issues and the tap is still running. We need to close that tap. So the voice of survivors are very critical for the work that we do as UNFPA. We respect their experiences and their rights to be heard and their rights for their needs to be met. So they are part of the co-creation of the interventions that we implement. In order to ensure that they have that voice, we have to build the voice. It's not everybody who has even the opportunity to sit at a table. So we have to create that space for them. We have to ensure that the most marginalized either have a voice or has somebody speaking for them. We need to hear their voice, and that should influence the interventions that we have. So apart from co-creating the interventions based on their experiences and their needs, we also build a coalition of survivors. I'm happy to mention that one of our very powerful young leaders who leads a Gardenet initiative, Madam Hannah, is here with us. One of our key partners, local partners, to ensure that we are creating space for survivors, for their voices to be heard, and we understand what their needs are, so that we are able to not only implement interventions that address those needs, but are able to influence others also to ensure that those needs are met. If you allow me to just briefly share experience, a short experience that I had. Last week, I was in Falaba district, one of the hardest to reach districts in the country. No bank, no road. You are on a 4-hour journey with no road. My first impression was like, wow, what a difficult journey for UNFPA, because maybe development should have reached here first before we try to change what is considered culture. But those are the realities of our work. We have to conquer these difficulties head on. So we also have to take into consideration the different contexts where the survivors are. There are survivors in Freetown who could have access to services because services are readily available by several partners. But there's a girl who's been raped in Falaba, who is surrounded by, you reach the community, you can cut the patriarchy, okay? So you wonder, what chance, this girl did not choose to be born here. What chance does she have? So this should then, spur us as partners to really have the difficult conversations so that we are creating space for everybody, especially the ones that are so invisible to everything, who exist in the same patriarchy that we are trying to fight. There are girls and women who wake up every day, that is their existence. So how do we ensure that their voice is heard? I think.
Thank you very much. My next question is going to go to the Attorney General. Just summarizing from what Nimco said, she has talked about the importance of holding those in power accountable, and you have talked about the importance of making sure that there is space for survivors to be involved in the decision-making process and in the process of service delivery. I'm going to ask the Attorney General. Sierra Leone has taken bold steps like repealing discriminatory laws, which has enabled progress in terms of the lessons and the strategies. But I want to ask, what do you think remains undone?
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to attend this event and to share this platform with very incredible speakers. Sometimes when I'm in spaces like this, I don't know whether to wear my hat as a government official or to go back to my life before this, you know, in civil society. But I guess, you know, some people like to say it's an opportunity to maintain a good balance. I like to say that, as I've said to some of my civil society colleagues, I think being in this space is an extension of the work that we did together, you know, in civil society. I think it's civil society really now coming into government, not, you know, me transitioning into government. And so with that, you know, I think the first thing to admit is that progress is not the same as completion. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done. But I think noting what has been done so far and then, you know, acknowledging that there's a lot that needs to be done, it's really an opportunity for us to reimagine how we think about justice, how we think about survivors. In my previous life, I did some work in Kenya after the post-elections violence. My days in The Hague used to spend a lot of time in Kenya and engaged with a lot of survivors and heard their stories and really got me thinking. And then, you know, I raised this question among colleagues. You know, first is to ask, say, the justice we seek, is it the justice that survivors want? I think it's a question that should always be on the table, you know, and when we do that, puts us in a position to listen to survivors and be informed by that perspective, you know, as to the justice that they want. There was a survivor of rape in Kenya, and based on, you know, our interaction, what I did was, instead of hearing these stories and going back to The Hague or going to sessions of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, what I insisted on was really, you know, taking them along, you know, bringing them to the table where they were able to speak up for themselves, you know, and get people to understand. So I think that has also informed the perspective that now we have in government, you know. When we talk about, you know, what else needs to be done, you know, we want to be informed by what survivors want, you know. And so the question of the justice we seek, whether it's the justice that survivors want. I like to go to the national vision following the end of the conflict in Sierra Leone. We had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and then, of course, after that, there was the national vision, which really encouraged Sierra Leoneans to lay out their own vision of where Sierra Leone should head to. And a former college mate of mine, his late now Lavai Tivai Bundu, wrote about justice, you know, and said justice should really be like the clothes we wear. They are really you should be able they should serve the persons that they are actually meant to serve, you know. And so that also informs the perspective in this conversation, noting that like the clothes we wear different sizes. And so when we talk about reimagining justice, the way we deliver justice, it's acknowledging that people's justice needs are different. You know, survivors have different justice needs. And so that should really inform the range of justice services that we provide. We say that, and I like to really talk about delivering justice in the context of the way we approach health and education. When we go to the hospital, we don't just get Tylenol or Panadol, because we all go there with different needs. I think, when we talk about the progress that needs to be made, we should be informed by that survivors have different needs. And, going by what we just heard about, the challenge of reaching a place like Falaba, I think, when we look at justice as service that government should provide to the people, similar to health and education, that should actually inform what we take to places like Falaba. Acknowledging that, yes, there's a percentage of our population that gets its justice needs met through the court, but a significant percentage actually gets its justice needs met outside the court system. And so that should actually inform the range of services that we provide to communities, especially those that are hard to reach. But then, the point is, I think a few things have informed progress, and a few things need to inform our commitment for what else needs to be done. Yes, we need to change norms. I said we need to reimagine the way we think about justice. We need to deploy several justice services across the country. We need to reform our laws. We need to make sure that, yes, we reform these laws, and then we implement them. So yes, we need to strengthen the accountability regime. But we also need to acknowledge that progress also means understanding that accountability goes beyond prosecution, and so that should inform what we do when we talk about survivor-led accountability processes. And so that is going to really inform how we approach our work. But there are a few things that I've listed which should really complement each other in all of this. Yes, our progress has been informed by resolute political will. That should continue. And when we started conversations in this country about pregnant girls being in school, even the president likes to acknowledge that he was first opposed to that. He said, but he listened. He had the voices of survivors. He had the voices of activists. And then, there was a change of mindset. And so yes, that political will helped change that. Now that policy has changed, and so pregnant girls go to school. And, as we used to say, people have not died, right? And so we see the marked progress we see the marked progress in the numbers. But, another thing that should really complement the resolute political will is, survivor-led and civil society advocacy. That is really important. We see how that informed the amendment of the Sexual Offences Act in this country. And then, of course, we think strategic partnerships should also complement these two that I've just highlighted. Our partnerships with UNFPA, our partnership with civil society partners, and we want to use this partnership to review our laws. Right now, we're in discussions about reviewing several of the pieces of legislation that we have that really affect women. But I also really believe that, yes, we have these three, but really importantly, we need a national conscience to inform these conversations. Yeah. Yes, Professor talked about what is happening in Parliament. And I think that is where I say, yes, we need a national conscience to inform the conversations, because, if we are still using the Offences Against the Persons Act, which goes back to 1861, that's about 165 years back, that is really what, that's what criminalizes abortion. And so when we get into these conversations with members of parliament, religious leaders, we try to get them to understand that, as a matter of conscience, we should not be applying laws that were made in 1861 targeting women in our current day climate. And so, yes, government remains very committed to the Safe Motherhood bill, which we have taken to Parliament. And then same as the Child Rights Bill that is in Parliament. And so we want all of these to, we want a national conscience to inform how we review our laws. Now we have a few pieces of legislation coming into place. The Criminal Procedure Act coming into force in September this year. Will really alter the way we deliver justice. You know, it's going to provide, for the first time, it will really provide for alternative sentencing.
Thank you.
You know, it will really strengthen systems for participation of vulnerable or marginalized groups in the judicial process. There are a few other, you know, reform ideas on the table, but I'm sure that, you know, I'll have the chance to roll some of these out during these conversations. But yes, you know, I want to close this again by, you know, going back to where I started, which is acknowledging that progress is not the same as completion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. I know that this is a very sensitive conversation and we have so much to say. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and I would encourage that after the panel discussion, we can continue with one another as delegates when we are networking and interacting. So I'm going to open the floor to the other delegates to just ask one question. Yes, please. Is the mic on?
Hello? Yeah. I just want to say that, like, you know, a respectful question to the minister, and again, on the theme of holding those in leadership accountability. I heard a lot of words, and some of the words were listening to survivors and justice. And I think one of the key things is that millions of women in Sierra Leone have been asking for legislation against FGM, and that is what justice really looks like. That's what real change looks like. And ultimately, when young girls are being mutilated in whatever consciousness that is, you won't be able to get access to getting people to respect women when they're being raped, or access to maternal health and all these other kind of things. So I think you can use a lot of words, but there's been very little action and very little progress in the fact of listening to women that are being mutilated in this country. So I think something that I would really applaud to you is that you can't be a developed country, you can't be in front of the IMF and all these people pretending and protesting to be a civilized country when women are being mutilated on a daily basis.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. You know, and that is where I say, yes, progress has been made, and but it's not the same as completion. And on the part of government, there's definitely a commitment on the part of government to abolish the practice of FGM in this country. And I was part of the team that drafted the bill that we have in Parliament. The hold-up has actually been in Parliament. But the point is that the President and the entire cabinet is committed to that. And I've been really part of that engagement with members of Parliament. I mean, of course, you know, supporting the voices of survivors, as well as, you know, other civil society activists. Yes, we acknowledge that there's a hold-up in Parliament, but we've not given up. We are pushing very hard, and we want, you know, the rhetoric to be reflected in the action. And look, the whole point is that for me, from where I sit as a lawyer who has spent almost like all of my career doing human rights practice, I believe that there should be accountability, even on the existing legislation when it comes to the practice of FGM. You know, but when I say we have to reimagine the way we deliver justice, you know, these are all ideas that we have on the table. Say, yes, there's a hold-up on the bill in Parliament, but then now we are looking at, are there existing laws that we can use, you know, as a government to ensure that the practice itself is abolished.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I just want to beg one more time that we don't have a lot of time, so let's give the opportunity to the other delegates to ask one question. So is there someone who has one question to ask?
There's a member of Parliament here who would like to respond. We can hand over to her.
So one question, and then there is a member of parliament who has a contribution to make, and then we will be rounding up this panel discussion.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers here present. And I think we're not hitting on the minister, but it's really great that he's here as a minister, and he's spoken about all of the progress that is being done in Sierra Leone and the laws and reforms. But I'm always confused because I work in this space, that every time we speak about reforms, we speak about laws, we speak about political will, the executive then moves away from the legislative. All of a sudden, the president wants us to pass these laws. The cabinet wants us to pass these laws. But the parliamentarians are also part of the government. So what is the president, the cabinet, what are you doing? How are you ensuring? Because I see your commitment to, we need to get, as a lawyer, you've said it, this is 1847 or 18, but what does that translate to us in the movements, to us as activists, to us that know that this is something you want, this is something the president wants? Why is it being held in parliament? Why are these bills still being held? And the pressure is not coming from everybody in the executive branch to make sure it's passed. And when it comes to other issues that are not women-related issues, there's pressure, and it passes. So I really want to understand that bit of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before the minister can answer the question, I would just like to ask the member of parliament who has the contribution to make to do it briefly, then we can answer the question. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, I'm going to be very brief, and maybe in reaction to what my sister said and then the minister. We, as honorable members of parliament, are representing over 10,000 people. We are representing our constituents. And so whatever we get from our constituents is what we bring to parliament. So like on the area of the Safe Motherhood Bill, which have something on the abortion, it is still in parliament because our constituents, because of the feedback that we've received from our constituents, for them, it is a no-go area. And so when it comes to parliament, even though we have the political will from the cabinet and others, but when it comes to parliament, we listen from our people, from our constituents. So this is why that bill is still in parliament. Like for the Child Rights Act, the minister is also here. There is a portion on the Child Rights Act that also talks about FGM. And then this is a social issue. And for us, the FGM, it has the social aspect part of it. And our constituents say that aspect in that bill, because there are a lot of good things in the Child Rights Act, to protect the child. But then that aspect in that bill is the bone of contention. So this is where the problem is. So if these bills are still in parliament and are still on hold, it is because of the contentious aspects in those bills.
Thank you. Thank you for that contribution. Now I'm going to give the floor to the minister.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very briefly, sir.
All right.
Please, can we try to focus on the conversation? We can have more of this conversation afterward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So, so first is really to note that our approach to governance, and especially that which has to do with legislation, is also informed by separation of powers, right? That there's the executive arm, the legislative arm, and the judicial arm. So, yes, we draft the bills, but then, as you have heard the member of parliament say, they have a responsibility for debating and passing that bill into law. On these issues, we become advocates like you, which means like we engage members of parliament on this subject. When the bills move to the legislative committee, we engage with the legislative committee. When the bills move to, when they are before the entire membership of parliament, we engage. We have pre-legislative hearings, wherein we explain the bill, but we do advocacy. And on these two very important bills that are before Parliament, the President himself has convened meetings with various stakeholders, really stressing the importance of these two bills and why Parliament needs to pass them into law. So it is to really say that on these two bills, we are on different pages with the Parliament. And so, of course, you know, the utmost respect for the Member of Parliament and the amazing work that members of Parliament do, representing the views of constituents. I think we also have to state that, you know, as leaders, we have a responsibility to do what is right. And on these two issues, especially hearing the Member of Parliament say, like on the Child Rights Bill, there are so many good things in the bill. But then there's this one area where, say, there's disagreement. So, I mean, the question that we have asked is, are we going to hold up a progressive piece of legislation just for one provision that we have disagreement on? You know, it's a question of, you know, whether this is really what our constituents want. You know, how did we get to that conclusion? Of course, we've had consultations, you know. But yes, members of Parliament have insisted that they do not want to go against the wishes of their constituents. Some of us have even said, you know, maybe, you know, we should go to these constituencies and do opinion polls or like put ballot boxes there and see. I mean, I know that on some of these issues, you know, members of Parliament themselves have been strong advocates. Some have spoken as survivors themselves, you know. So I know members of Parliament who really want this. But, you know, there are lots of dynamics that have held the process up. But it is just to say that we are on different pages with members of Parliament on this. Government wants it, the President wants it, and the President is pushing really hard. These engagements will continue. We do not intend to withdraw the bills that are before Parliament. We intend to keep them there. We do not intend to water them down. We intend to keep them the way they are and to really advocate that these two bills be passed into law. There's political will, but I think national conscience has to come into play, and then for us to actually acknowledge that this is about human lives. And, you know, we cannot use perceptions of what society looks like to continue to impact human lives in such significant ways.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We are going to round up the panel discussion, but before we do that, I'll give the floor to Madam Mayor to make a contribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who's spoken. It's Ms. Carter from Purposeful. I think she made a really good point, which was around the implementation, or could we say the realization, the crystallization of political will. Where there's a will, there's a way. Mm-hmm. And Honorable Member of Parliament, Rosie, also made the point about the constituents. So I see a way forward. And I think that way forward is about government putting the resources required, not for consultation, but for education. So a lot of times, people's misunderstanding, or we are talking about decades, generations of practice. We're talking about misinformation. We're talking about patriarchy. We're talking about control systems. So if you want change, there's more you have to do than simply consulting, because you haven't changed a mindset when you've consulted. You've just asked an opinion. And of course, the opinion is based on pre-knowledge. So what we need to see government doing to really get behind these bills is investing in education, moving around the country into communities, explaining, you know, giving voice to those with the experience, the country views, giving the facts, giving the stories, giving the experiences, and helping our constituents to make informed decisions. Because at the moment, if their members of Parliament go to them and ask them the question, they're going to say what they know. Yeah. So if government wants this to happen, my humble plea, my dear brother and friend, my humble plea is that government puts its money where its mouth is and actually invests in ensuring that we understand what this means. what this means to the future of girls, what this means to the lives of women, and therefore what this means to the future of our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that wonderful contribution. I want to thank the panelists. It's been an honor having this discussion with you, even though we had to do it under such short time. And I'm very happy with the composition because we had voices from the grassroots, we had institutions that are doing service delivery, and of course we have the government and the judiciary that are working around the laws to change things for the better. What I would like to conclude is to say that our bodies, Mr. Minister, I am going to address this directly to you because you are the representation of the government. And this, I am not just talking about Sierra Leone. To me, you are representing all the African governments in Africa right now, so including Cameroon. Our bodies are not a thing for men, for patriarchy to play with. We are humans. We are not just the statistics. 1 in 3 women have suffered GBV before they reach 18 years. 1 in 10 girls don't have access to sanitary pads to go to school. That's not who we are. We are real. We have emotions. We feel pain. We have trauma. What you, as representatives of the government, need to do, talking as someone coming from the grassroots, is do what Madam Mayor said, put your money where your mouth is. Madam just said that they are listening to their constituency, and that's how they pass the rule. But tell me, why is it that when it comes to election and we go to vote, our votes are not being counted and directed to the candidates that we vote for? Why is it only when it comes to issues that are crucial to the health and the well-being and the human rights of women? Like Madam said, you cannot continue to leave the decisions about the health and well-being of women onto the hands of the custodians of patriarchy, irrespective of whether they are women or they are men. As we have heard countless times today, ladies and gentlemen, women are one of the strongest upholders of patriarchy. I, as a humanitarian worker, had to go 6 months with a packet of condoms in my backpack while I worked in 7 refugee camps. Do you know why? Because I hoped that if I am ever going to be raped, I could negotiate with my rapists to use those condoms. Thank God it never happened, but I have colleagues who still do the same thing and are still in the refugee camps. I don't know if it has happened to them, but Mr. Minister, that should not be the reality of anybody. That should not be the reality of NIMCO. It has to end with us. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to ask our panelists, starting from NIMCO, to each read their pledge and put it in the pledge box. Okay. Okay, should I start mine? Okay, so that I can buy you time. So I, Konda Delphine, endorse African Young Women Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto. I commit to demand for the Demand 5 on sexual and reproductive health rights. I pledge to promote sexual and reproductive health education for adolescent girls and young women through a national campaign in all 10 regions of Cameroon to reach 30,000 girls in the next 2 years in my capacity as founder of Girls Excel with a budget of myself. Thank you.
Okay, so I, Nimco Ali, endorse African Young Women's Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto. I'm being greedy. I commit to sexual reproductive health rights and also economic justice. I pledge to work with G7 countries to make more liquidity available for African women, because when our pockets are full, our bodies are protected. And I do this with my energy.
I, Sive Somololoma, endorse Africa Young Women's Beijing Plus 20 Manifesto. I pledge on behalf of UNFPA to contribute to a Mama Salon where not only will women not die while giving birth, but no girl should die, just so that culture can be upheld.
Apologies, I had not written everything. So hopefully I get it all right. But I, Alpha Cisse, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Republic of Sierra Leone, endorse Africa Young Women's Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto. I commit to lead on gender justice in Sierra Leone. I pledge to be a leading voice and I pledge to be a leading voice and an ally in survivor-led advocacy with gender-inclusive or sensitive budgeting within the justice sector, and I do this in my capacity as Attorney General and Minister of Justice.
Woo. So I'm going to call everyone on this panel for a group photo, and I will leave it to the MC to decide how the two videos that had to be played is going to look like, because I know we've taken so much time. So please, can we come together for a group photo?